You don't have to be a billionaire to slow down the aging. You can do that with whatever economic resources that you have available.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have Dr. Terry Wahls on the show again. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We recorded our first episode 3 years ago, and we covered multiple sclerosis or MS. We covered your research, we covered some of your protocols, pretty in depth. So, for those of who haven't heard that, I'd love for you to briefly share what is MS and then the incredible comeback
Sure.
story that you had from the wheelchair bound with MS to an active, healthy life.
Yeah.
Practicing researcher, author, incredible medical empire that you built, and now you're helping others with MS.
So, multiple sclerosis is the leading cause for neurologic disability here in the United States. It is a disease caused by the immune system beginning to attack the brain, attacking the myelin or the insulation around the wiring, the connection between brain cells. And it predominantly affects women. About 80% of the patients with MS are women. Early on, there are flares called relapses. We have more severe symptoms, disability, things gradually improve. That's called the remission. So it starts out relapsing, remitting, and then about the time of menopause, perimenopause, in the mid 40s, 45 to 55, our immune cells are getting old and they don't work as well. So there aren't so many relapses. Instead, there's a slow, steady decline. And that's when women convert from the relapsing, remitting phase of the illness to the secondary progressive phase of the illness. And again, no more relapses, just a slow, steady decline. That's when there's more and more difficulty walking, more difficulty with fatigue, anxiety, depression, brain fog, and early loss of employment, early loss of independence, needing assisted living, needing nursing home care. And we have these great drugs that are very effective at turning off the relapses. And they delay the conversion to the progressive phase of the illness by 5 years. And so that's good news. 5 years, very helpful, but it doesn't stop the progressive disability and the early job loss. And I suffered that as well. I was diagnosed at age 45, saw the best MS center in the country, took the newest drugs. By age 48, I'm in a tilt recline wheelchair. My disease has progressed to secondary progressive MS. By age 52, I'm beginning to have brain fog. I have severe fatigue. I have actually severe pain from trigeminal neuralgia, and I'm so weak I can no longer sit up. I'm in a zero gravity chair, and fortunately, I've been reading, experimenting, doing all that I can to figure out what I could do to slow my decline. And I discovered electrical stimulation of muscles, add that to my rehab. I discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine. They have a longer list of supplements. I had those. And then I had this really big aha, and I laugh at how long it took to have this. What if I redesigned the Paleolithic diet that I've been following for 5 years based on all these supplements that I'm taking? And so I redesigned my diet. It's very structured now. And to my amazement, it's like miracle grow. My fatigue resolves, my mental clarity improves. My physical therapist says, well, Terry, you're definitely getting stronger. He advances my exercises. And within 6 months, I'm up again. I am biking, and I'm able to do an 18.5-mile bike ride. So this radically changes how I think about disease and health. It will change the type of medicine that I practice, and I ultimately changes the type of research that I do. And I've now been researching this functional medicine approach to multiple sclerosis and other chronic diseases, autoimmune diseases, with remarkable success. I'm sure we'll get into that. It's really had a huge impact on the field because of my TED Talk, which has over 4 million views, because of my bestseller books, The Wahls Protocol, which have had over 400,000 sales. It has really driven a tremendous interest in the MS and autoimmune community that, in fact, there's a lot that we can be doing, and that you want to be doing all that you can, in addition to whatever you can do with the FDA-approved drugs. So yes, they're still helpful. I don't discourage people from using them. I want them to know that you got to be doing your part too.
You summed it up so well. Thank you so much. And I really encourage people to go listen to that first episode because we get into the nitty gritty there. And I think I mentioned, I can't remember if I mentioned last time, when my husband introduced me to TED Talks, I was like, what's that? This was maybe 13 years ago. And he showed me your video. Yours was the very first TED Talk I ever looked at.
Yeah.
And
You
that,
know,
yeah, that went viral.
it's super interesting. When I had the opportunity to prepare for the TED Talk, my son sat me down and said, Mom, this will be the most important talk you ever give in your life. So you should write this out, edit it. I'm happy to give you feedback. Practice it and I gave it to 6 different small groups here at the University of Iowa, got feedback, tweaked it. And it was actually version 25 that I gave. And he was right. That really has been the most important talk that I ever gave. It was, I think, 17 minutes and 25 seconds. He said, you be sure it's timed, so it's going to be under 18 minutes. Have a very clear call to action. It should be a compelling and interesting story. And so it was wonderful advice. I'm now working on mentoring other physicians here at the university about the importance of a story and seeking out opportunities to give TED Talks.
It had a huge impact. In fact, I'm sure you didn't even guess how impactful it was and how it's changed the trajectory of research in MS. And I'm sure you heard a lot of feedback that said, oh, well, diet and lifestyle, what, not medicine? Or
the first couple of years, like, oh my goodness, the public would go into neurology, ask about that TED Talk. In the MS neurology community was originally deeply angry, skeptical. There were tremendous negative blowback. They thought I was extremely dangerous, unprofessional. And after all, I'm not a neurologist. I'm not a PhD. Like, who the hell do you think you are? And so there's a lot of negativity. My chief of staff called me and said, okay, Terry, what's going on? You're a banned speaker. And so I got some of that I had to deal with. And that, by the way, that was before the TED Talk. And then, fortunately, my university was okay with my TEDx messaging. And then when my book came out, again, there was this intense interest from the MS community. And at first, there was intense pushback from the MS neurology community. But the MS Society also monitors their social media because they need to know what their community and their donors want. And the message they got from their donors was, we want a wellness conference and we want Wahls there.
Interesting.
And so that I created interest from the public that pushed the MS Society to be much more interested in diet, in exercise, in stress reduction. And so that changed the direction of their research priorities. And so that's had a huge impact. Now, as I've been going to the scientific meetings for the Americans Committee of Treatment and Research, the Consortium of MS Centers, again, these are the American MS research meetings. When we first went, I was the only researcher talking about food. And that was in 2017. Now, in 2025, we're not the only one talking about food. We have oral presentations. We have our works being cited. People will stop me, have questions about the research, and I see it's super fun. The last meeting I was at, the very last lecture, which is talking about gut-brain immune axis, in the slides were pictures of my book. And so I laughed. I went up, introduced myself, so took some selfies with their scientific community. So I've gone from crazy lunatic to brilliant, one of the grandmothers that are driving this awareness that modifiable lifestyle factors are the unifying driver, particularly in terms of the chronic progressive phase. It's called progression in the absence of relapse activity. And that's what drives the disability. You don't have relapses, true, but it's the progression that happens independent of relapse activity. And that really affects women in perimenopause and menopause. And men will also have this as well. But of course, autoimmunity is largely a female disease. And once we hit menopause, it becomes a much more aggressive, progressive illness.
Interesting. Like so many other illnesses, since I've seen you last, I've had hip osteoarthritis since my 40s. I didn't know what that was at the time. I've had 2 hip replacements, and I saw a progression, a very fast progression. I've been able to delay this fine until the loss of my hormones, and then suddenly nothing was
Everything progresses. What happens beginning in our 40s, the stem cells coming out of the third ventricle in the brain, which go to the hypothalamus, which then stimulate the release of hormones to the pituitary, which stimulate the release of hormones to the rest of our endocrine organs. And as the hormone signals decline, aging begins to happen. Our immune cells age, our stem cells age, and all of our tissues begin breaking down. Now, our billionaires, the top 1/10 of the percent that have so much money, are funding these research centers devoted to aging. They are making very interesting breakthroughs on the science of why we are beginning to die in our mid 40s, and what could we do to slow down that loss of aging, and are there things that we can do in our 60s, 70s, 80s to begin to reverse that? So I'm certainly following that. I think we'll continue to have a lot of advances that, yes, there will be things that we can do. And certainly there are things that the billionaire class are doing already on a very regular basis with stem cell infusions, HBOT, and a bunch of technologies that the ordinary folks who are not billionaires, we won't be able to access. But there are things that we can do and that we are doing that are either accelerating our aging or slowing our aging. And for your listeners, the things that are accelerating your aging: sitting all day, living in a very narrow temperature range, 68 to 72 degrees, eating all of the time, eating a lot of what I call high glycemic foods, high in sugar, high in white flour. Adults, we get 60% of our calories from sugar and white flour.
Crazy.
Our children are getting 70% of the calories from sugar and white flour. And they are not running around, not being very active. They're being very sedentary. We're being very sedentary. Those two factors are rapidly accelerating our aging. Addressing those two factors, we could have an immense impact on slowing our aging.
I'm wondering, MS affects, you said, more women than men, I think 2 to 3 times.
80% of women. Shocking.
And then correct me if I'm wrong, the diagnoses happen somewhere between 20 and 40.
For the vast majority, it's being diagnosed earlier because we have MRIs, so it's easier to get to that technology. Sadly, we have more children being diagnosed. And again, I think that's because of the things that we've done in the environment, that 70% of the ultra-processed foods that our kids are having, sedentary time, and probably toxin exposures. Those are the three things that are accelerating the diagnosis for everyone, including our children.
It accelerates the diagnosis of many diseases of aging. That's what's so
terrible, right?
And MS is both, you mentioned, autoimmune disease and a neurodegenerative disease. So what's interesting is also that we know that estrogen is anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective. So it sounds like you said there's a progression. It gets worse when we go through this period of post-menopause transition, when that protection is gone with the loss of estrogen. Is it the hormonal changes that are accelerating this, or is there something else?
It's the loss of estrogen, certainly very much an accelerant. And if you have an autoimmune disease, you are more likely to have premature loss of estrogen. And by the way, if you're a man, premature loss of testosterone. So having autoimmunity accelerates the onset of estrogen failure and testosterone failure. And when that happens, that will accelerate your aging and accelerate the disability.
So is there any research showing if using hormone therapy to be?
Yeah, so there's research with the estrogen compound estriol. That's very helpful. And if people are using that, I recommend they take it sublingually. The research on estrogen is a little bit confusing. If they use oral contraceptive tablets, those are synthetic estrogens. I think that's going to be less positive. There's not as much research on estradiol or bioidentical estrogen. We need more research there. There is research on the benefits of progesterone, which, by the way, you can take orally. And there's more research there for neurodegenerative issues related to cognitive decline, traumatic brain injury. It's been very protective there. And in my practice, I certainly encourage everyone to get their hormones measured, and really all of their hormones, thyroid, sex hormones, adrenal hormones, and then address any insufficiencies that are found, or in the terms of the cortisol, any imbalances in how the cortisol levels are secreted throughout the day.
Mm-hmm. Do you see any improvements in MS symptoms? Because there's
absolutely. So When we think about MS symptoms, there are the cognitive, anxiety, depressive, fatigue symptoms, and those are probably the most responsive and the easiest to measure improvement in 3 to 6 months. When we look at motor improvements in terms of walking changes, we do see that as well. That's a little more nuanced. We certainly have been able to measure an improvement in walking endurance that occurs within 6 months. Now, when I'm measuring those in my clinical trials, there are a couple of trials that have had a multimodal intervention. And I think that, of course, is the most potent when you improve diet, improve exercise, improve stress management. Then we have some more comprehensive program. Although we still also see better walking endurance at 6 months when people improve their nutrition. So
there's a lot of crossover. So if a woman's listening now, with some of these symptoms, like you said, there's fatigue and there's the brain fog and memory issues, muscle weakness. She might think, well, how do I know if this is menopause or if this is actually something more serious?
well, certainly, I want people who have menopausal symptoms, by all means, go see your physician, get your hormone levels assessed, and optimize the hormone levels because your brain will suffer without estrogen. So I really encourage replacing estrogen and replacing it with a bioidentical and having regular follow-up with whoever's managing your estrogen. Then they should also do a history and examination and consider, are there additional factors that should be evaluated? Now, it's unusual to make a diagnosis of MS after age 40, but absolutely it can still happen. And so depending on your symptom constellation, there may be a reason to do an evaluation, perhaps do a more detailed visual examination referral to ophthalmology, perhaps a MRI, perhaps a referral to neurology and a spinal tap. But that really depends on first the history and the exam. Now, the official diagnosis of MS is two events separated by time and location with a neurologic symptom. So perhaps a visual problem related to optic neuritis, first episode, second episode, weakness in my right hand. So that's different parts of my brain. And it's separated by perhaps a couple months, a couple years. And now we have a reason to have a confirmed diagnosis of MS. The first time there's symptoms that you can't otherwise explain, such as the vision problem, optic neuritis, or the hand weakness. And we do a workup. There's no obvious stroke or infection or low B vitamin levels or positive autoimmune antibodies that explain something else going on. That first episode's called a clinically isolated syndrome. Yeah, and so you're at risk for MS, and then they would probably have you followed by neurology closely to see, like, okay, is this just a one-time episode, or is there a second, and now we have confirmed multiple sclerosis?
You mentioned autoimmune disease also affects disproportionately more women than men. Why is that?
We do not fully know. It certainly must be tied into our sex in the differences in the immune response that we have to have in order to carry a fetus, growing baby in the uterus. Our immune systems respond differently than men's immune systems. And in that process, it has made us more vulnerable to developing autoimmunity. And exactly why that is, we do not know, but we do know it is deeply connected to the differences in how our immune cells respond and develop tolerance, because we have to develop tolerance to the growing baby. And it means that we have to develop tolerance to foreign tissues differently than men.
Yeah, it's actually that's a pretty good explanation, I would say. Your book is really detailed. I have to say, I really encourage people to just go get the Wahls protocol, because you do talk a lot more in detail about nutrition and exercise and supplements and lifestyle changes. It's like a manual. And you're a physician and you've reversed your own MS and now you're teaching others to do the same. So in your own protocol, what are your key non-negotiables that maybe most women in midlife are doing?
Well, women in midlife, I really want you to strength train. We need to maintain our muscle mass and our bone minerals and the drives for our brain. That is really quite profound. And then for me personally, I have to avoid some key foods because that'll trigger my pain. And for me, that's dairy, eggs, and gluten. For women in general, I want you to have sufficient protein, non-starchy vegetables, and berries. And I prefer that people eat meat, but if you're spiritually opposed to that, then it's going to be legumes and some grain. And be mindful that you may have unrecognized sensitivity to gluten, the protein in many grains, and to dairy. So if you have autoimmunity, I encourage you to at least have a trial of being without gluten and without dairy. If you don't have autoimmunity, I just want you to have protein, non-starchy vegetables, and berries, and strength train, strength train, strength train, strength train. In my routine, 2 days a week, I'm jogging on my treadmill, and 3 days a week, I'm strength training. And then the other days, I'm hiking, biking, being outside, having a good time.
So when you are in pain, if you imagine someone who's listening now has MS and is struggling with that, and you shared your story, which is incredible, and how you were swimming and still pushed through, what do you recommend for a woman who is really feeling the pain, and how can she exercise without that?
Well, the first thing I want people who are struggling with pain or with any symptom is pay attention to what you think when you're having a good day. In the previous 24 hours, do you have any theories as to why that was a good day? And then when you have a worse day in the previous 24 hours, do you have any theories about why that was a worse day? And you may begin to see patterns that when you are exposed to stress, a big stress at work or at home, you have more pain. Or when you have more joy in your life, you have less pain. Or when you went out for pizza and beer with your friends, oh my God, you had a lot worse pain. Or when you had cooked greens and some salmon, actually you had a really great day. If you're willing to begin to learn to identify what are the triggers for your pain and the triggers for a really good day, over time, you will begin to shape your eating pattern and your daily rituals to be more health supportive. If you're open to an experiment of like, okay, I'm going to have an experiment and I'm going to try the Wahls protocol for 100 days. And for people to work with me at the VA clinic, that was what we asked is, you have to be willing to commit to 100% for 100 days, then you can come work with us. If that's too hard, we'll just send you to the dietitian to work on improving your diet at the pace you can manage, or to the physical therapist to work at improving your exercise at a pace that you can manage. And that's okay, because not everyone's ready for 100%. But if you wanted to work with us, you had to be ready for 100%. And then we'd have monthly group visits, and people did extraordinarily well and transformed their lives. That word of mouth created a huge demand. So we had to go from group visits to large group visits to classes to huge classes to reach the message of just how much we can do as we begin to optimize our diet and modifiable lifestyle factors. And if you can find someone to do it with you, a peer group, I think you'll be much more successful.
We'll have links in the show notes to your website. I think it's been a great resource for anyone who has MS and to get that help that they need. But I'm wondering, I remember when our last conversation, you were saying you were swimming a lot. So if somebody is having a good day, let's say, and she feels, okay, I can do a little bit of exercise, and strength training is fabulous. I think maybe that's probably a good thing for anyone to do. But are there exercises that are less impactful, less painful?
So when you first start, some of our folks are really quite profoundly disabled. I'm thinking of Josie, who, wheelchair dependent, was struggling to move from her wheelchair to the toilet independently, wheelchair to bed independently. And she met with her physical therapist. They had some very simple exercises she was doing from her wheelchair and from her bed. And these were bodyweight exercises, half jumping jacks with just her arms, but up and back and forth, lifting her knees up off the chair, back and forth, pushing her feet vigorously into the ground. That was her workout. And over time, she got stronger. The other thing that she made up her mind was she would do the gluten-free, dairy-free 100 days, 100%. And that was challenging, but it's like, okay, this is my little experiment. I'll do that, and I'll do my little little itsy bitsy tiny workout. And she was so excited that she made it through the 100% up for 100 days, and her pain was less. She was so excited. And it was getting easier to do her little workout, and she was doing that a couple times a day. And then she came back and said, I stood for 60 seconds. And she was so proud of herself. And she kept at it. She signed up for every one of our classes that we have, because we offer a variety of classes, and everything that I did that included a Q&A session. She was there, and she was telling us how she was doing, and people were so excited for her. And 4 years later, she is walking without a walker, and her goals now are walking her dogs on the beach. So it took time. It took perseverance. She set little tiny goals, and she achieved that goal. And then she made another little tiny goal and achieved that goal. And then that's my advice to all of your listeners is pick little tiny achievable goals. If you can, find somebody to check in with about your little tiny achievable goal, and then you can check in for them about their tiny achievable goal. And I predict success will lead to another goal in success, another goal in success. And realize that, yes, this will take time.
You need a lot of patience for sure. And I think the community is such a brilliant idea. And as a gerontologist, I know that the impact of human connection is absolutely incredible. And if you're going through this and you're feeling so alone, being part of a community, it's so wonderful that you're offering this, is impactful.
Loneliness is very, very inflammatory. Loneliness certainly activates the innate immune system. It accelerates aging. And if you can find time to call a friend, you can do it on the phone, you can do a video call, you could write letters back and forth to friends. You could go volunteer at your local nursing home, read to some of the residents there. You could volunteer in a preschool or a school, read to the kids, but find some way to connect with someone else.
Yeah. You're going to feel so much better. And I'm impressed with the brain body connection, the way that this client of yours, or the person who you were working with, has been able to progress. And I understand that completely 100% after 2 surgeries. You need patience, and your brain is already trained to not move in a certain way because of pain. And I've been living with chronic pain, and I know what that is. And it takes a lot of time for that new neural network to speak
Correct.
to the body, as well as fear. Like you don't trust your body anymore after a certain while. And I guess to build that up, it takes time.
Yeah, this is really neuroplasticity. Our bodies, it takes a lot of resources to run any part of my body, whether talking my brain, my liver, my bones, my muscles. And if I'm not using that part of my body because it's in a cast or because it hurts, my body will say, not being used, I got to take those resources and put them somewhere else that is being used. And so for those of us who've broken bones, I've certainly broken several, and I've been in multiple casts, when the cast comes off, that body part is very shriveled. The bone mineral density is markedly reduced. The muscles are markedly reduced. It'll take a lot of physical therapy and work to get the bone mineral density back, to get the muscles back, and to get the connection between my brain that goes down to the muscles, goes down to the bone, back in order. Any body part that we are not using will get reallocated. Those resources will get reallocated. So I'm hoping for all of your listeners, that will help you understand why it's important that we continue to use everything, to be using our brain, thinking, reading, learning, interacting with people, to be using our body so that we can be telling the body that, wait a minute, this part of my body's useful. Don't take any resources away from it. I'm using it.
I'm wondering if you ever used blood flow restriction bands.
So let me explain that to your audience.
Yeah.
You can put a compression band around your arms or your legs, and it's about the same level of compression that you probably have experienced when people are drawing blood. It's not real tight. It just decreases the flow back of the venous blood. And then you exercise doing weightlifting at about 25 to 30% of what you would normally do if you're doing a strength workout. That increases the strain on that body part while you're doing the workout. And it means that I can do strength training with a much, much smaller amount of weight. So there's less strain on my joints, my ligaments. It's been designed as a rehab tool for old farts and people who are disabled. And I'll put myself in that category of an old fart because I'm now 69. And it has been very helpful for improving bone density, muscle mass. It certainly does add the intensity of the workout. So when you start doing this, I encourage people to work with a physical therapist or athletic trainer, personal trainer that has some experience with blood flow restriction bands. It's certainly a very helpful tool for people as they are either older or have a little more disability, because you won't be putting near the amount of strain on your joints, your tendons, and your ligaments. But you get a really great increase in the signals called myokines that tell your body, build more muscle, build more stronger bones. And by the way, it looks like these same signals go to your brain to tell your brain to build the connections that go between your brain in those muscles and bones.
Thank you for that explanation. When I interviewed Dr. Dale Bredesen, who's all about Alzheimer's and dementia, and he recommended them as well. And I thank goodness I knew of them when I had my surgeries, and also 2 years prior. And I was told, you need to stop impact. You need to, and then slowly became less and less mobile and more sedentary. I just had these on all the time. And I have to say, my own personal experience has been really good. And since then, I always say, you don't have to be an old fart. You can be somebody who has to have injured, or maybe you have surgery.
Yeah.
Something, right?
This is a wonderful tool for increasing the intensity of your strength training with less stress on the joints, ligaments, and bones. I do like it a lot. I encourage people to use it. See if you can find a physical therapist, personal trainer who can assist you as you get started.
Yeah, absolutely. You need training. Please don't go on Amazon and buy these things and do this yourself. You need somebody who knows what they're doing. But I'm wondering, I want to go back a little bit to your TED Talk, because your TED Talk was called Minding Your Mitochondria. And mitochondrial health is really at the core of your research and protocol. And correct me if I'm wrong, but estrogen supports the mitochondrial function. So how does it change as a woman starts losing her estrogen? And then what are one or two
Well,
of the most important things that we can do to protect our mitochondrial health?
I want everyone to know that in our cells, there are about 2 billion chemical reactions occurring every second.
Great.
And that everything is connected to everything else. Life exists because these chemical reactions are deeply interconnected to keep everything sustained. And if we lose that ability to keep the chemical reactions going, then entropy happens, and death will ensue. Hormones are part of a deeply powerful signal in that complex chemistry of life. This wonderful chemistry began about 4 billion years ago and would gradually get a little more nuanced. The cyanobacters, about 1 billion years ago, give or take, began to make oxygen when they did photosynthesis. As the oxygen levels rose, that killed off, I believe, 95, 98% of all life forms, because oxygen is actually quite toxic. Fortunately for us, it took about 1 billion years to evolve the electron transport chain that utilized oxygen very effectively to make more ATP, or more energy for the cell. And now those ancient bacteria would be engulfed by bigger bacteria, and that was the forerunner of the mitochondria. The mitochondria, which generate ATP, the sort of the currency of life that cells can use to help direct this complicated chemistry, 2 billion reactions that are happening every moment. And all those mitochondria basically allowed cells to become multicellular. It allowed for the evolution of plants. It allows for the evolution of animals, movement. Every one of our tissues has mitochondria. The tissues that do the most work, like your brains, your eyeballs, your heart, have the most mitochondria per second. And remember that hormones are a very, very potent signal to how we run the chemistry of life. And so they're a very potent signal to our mitochondria. Losing our hormones means the mitochondria slowly deteriorate. So one of the things that we can do, which a great anti-aging strategy, is to get your hormones measured. And as they begin to decline as you age, you could find a integrative physician that says, you know what, you don't have to have aging hormones. I can monitor and replace your hormones and keep you in that 45, 50-year-old range forever. That will be really quite profound. And then the other really basic things that I want you to do is eat a nutritious diet and exercise. And those are probably the three most powerful things. Optimize your hormones, have a nutritious diet, and maintain exercise. Those will be very potent strategies for supporting your mitochondria.
I agree with it 100%. And I think when exercise, you feel the mitochondria getting bigger, more profound, or better acting or improving because you do feel the energy as
Yeah.
you continue to exercise, right?
I do want your listeners to know that when we exercise, you should have exercise and a recovery day. So that might mean, so in my case, I'll have strength days, and then I'll have balance days, and I'll have aerobic days, so that I can recover that body part that did the hard work. And earlier, when I was an athlete, I probably overtrained and created some needless injury and needless setbacks. If you are just beginning to exercise, it is really important to pay attention to, I'm going to exercise, and I'm going to fully recover, and then I'm going to exercise again. So that might mean you're going to pick an intentionally small exercise so that you have a day of recovery, and then you can go back to exercise. Because if you did whatever your exercise is and you can't function the rest of the day, it was too big for you. You should be able to get back to your usual level of energy within 2 hours and perform normally for you the next day. And if you can't, whatever exercise you did was too big for you and you need to do a smaller workout the next time.
Great advice. Yeah, that's what I've learned with age as well, is we need to recover a little bit more, spend a bit more time with that. But it had a couple of women in our community who really wanted me to reach out to you and discuss supplements. And this has been a part of your
Yeah.
book, right? You do always focus nutrition first. This is food first, but let's target maybe brain health and mitochondrial health.
Yeah.
What
So,
supplements?
I put this together in terms of what I call the basic Wahls supplements. Then we have the boost. So basic supplements, vitamin D3 plus vitamin K2. Next one is a multivitamin, multi-mineral, yeah, fish oil, and magnesium. So that's the basic, because the enzymes that supervise the chemistry of life require a vitamin and a mineral cofactor. That's why the multivitamin, multi-mineral is very helpful. And magnesium, very important for hundreds and hundreds of enzymes in the brain and body, and the majority of Americans don't have enough magnesium. So that's why that is put together. Then the boost would be an activated B vitamins, coenzyme Q, and N-acetylcysteine. So there's the basic, and then if you want to go on to the boost for a little bit more support, I certainly recommend that can be very helpful. And then it depends on other factors that you can think about. Many of us are exposed to so many toxins, or that you have a family history of breast cancer, and so you want to be sure that you're metabolizing estrogen products really well. And a detox support that supports both phase 1 and phase 2 detox would be very helpful. And to be sure you're not constipated, you got to be pooping every day. And so plenty of fiber and plenty of sauerkraut and kimchi every day. Be sure that poop is coming easily, comfortably, and not in your pants.
Yeah, exactly. Good points. But I'm wondering in terms of this supplements or for the detoxification pathways, everybody has their own opinions, which ones they like best. What are you recommending to your community, more or less?
Well, I've got a blend dual detox, which supports phase 1, phase 2. I add also N-acetylcysteine. That can be very helpful, and curcumin can be very helpful.
Oh, okay. So we can go and check out that on your probably your website.
Correct,
I'm really
correct.
curious, like what's inside that detox supplement. And what about with a multivitamin? I've heard that a lot of multivitamins on the market are just one a day and they don't really have enough. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on multis?
Well, I certainly, I want people to have a multivitamin, multimineral. Ideally, you want to have that has been manufactured here in the US with good manufacturing processes. And so that's what we have in the blend that we've put together.
And some people would say if there's more than one, like if you're taking three or four in a packet for your multivitamin, it's probably enough, because if you're getting like all of these things and try to stuff it into one, it may not be enough. Is that?
You're probably going to have a capsule, nice multivitamin, multimineral, or be somewhere between 2 and 4 capsules in a day.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So, okay. So I'm really, really glad you focused on the detoxification pathways of estrogen. I think it's really important. But as one of the most respected voices in functional medicine and someone who's led groundbreaking research on reversing autoimmune diseases, what do most doctors still get wrong about treating a woman who has Hashimoto's, MS, or other autoimmune?
Well, they aren't talking to them about nutrition. We have 50 million people, well, 25 million with a confirmed autoimmune diagnosis. 50 million with autoantibodies don't yet have a clear diagnosis. And then if people have one autoimmune diagnosis, we aren't acknowledging that if I don't get to your root causes, in the next 10 years, you're going to get a second autoimmune diagnosis. And if I don't evaluate and address the root causes, in another 10 years, you'll have a third autoimmune diagnosis. And the conventional world is focused on making the diagnosis using the FDA-approved treatments. And they may not know to be talking to you about nutrition, about your toxin exposures, about your hormone balance, and having you at least consider the possibility of removing at least gluten and dairy from your diet and improving nutrition quality. And ideally, considering the possibility of an elimination diet to see are there other foods that are an issue? Is leaky gut an issue that we have to deal with? And toxin exposure. Here in Iowa, we have been rapidly climbing on the cancer leaderboard. I think we're now #2 in the country for the rates of cancers, all cancers, and the age of diagnosis is declining. So we have more children with cancers, more young adults in their 20s, 30s, and 40s with cancers. Why is that? Is it the alcohol? Is it the glyphosate? Is it the other agricultural runoffs, water contaminations? Is it lead pipes? Is it heavy metals? I think there are many environmental factors that are not adequately appreciated. Plastics, pesticide solvents, lead, arsenic, mercury, cadmium, and other heavy metals. So I certainly am talking to my patients about water, air contaminations, what they can do about that, and food contaminations, and what they can do about that.
Mm. So are you recommending testing before buying some kind of
Well,
water filter?
so it really depends on the individual. So testing can be very helpful. It can be very motivating, like, holy shit, I do have a problem. And so I'm certainly supportive of testing. I also remind people that in my VA clinic, I couldn't do any of that testing. I could do some very basic primary care labs. And in my veteran population, I assumed that people were toxic. Of course, they had even more extraordinary exposures than the non-military personnel in the state. But we put them on a detox protocol. We train them on how and why to filter their water, how and why to get their air filtered. And now most of my veterans were living in rural Iowa, Illinois, Missouri. They were not shopping at Whole Foods. They were just doing the best they could in their little tiny grocery stores. And we were teaching them how to get the best quality of food that they could, given their financial limits. And a lot of these folks are living on food stamps. And we saw extraordinary results. And so we would teach them how to do their avoidance within their budget, how to filter their water within their budget, how to filter their air within their budget, how to take saunas. And we invented the car sauna. You can't do this in a new car. You do this in an old car.
Yeah.
You get in the car, roll up the windows, have a big jug of water, monitor your temperature, monitor the temperature in the car, and you get plenty of sweat. Or now I mean, now we're having 100-degree weather in Iowa, very humid. You can just go sit outside. So there are many ways to detox that are very affordable, whatever your financial resources that you can access.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, when we think about the biohacking community, we've got the red light therapy devices. Well, we could go watch a sunrise, or we can go, instead of
There,
the fancy,
right.
get in your car.
So yes, our billionaires have access to really amazing technologies that I'm not going to access, and that my tribe's not going to access.
Yeah.
So I acknowledge that there are these really interesting technologies being developed, new insights, innovations that yes, we can access, and there are very simple things that I taught my veterans to do who had no money, and they were extraordinarily successful.
Mhm.
So you don't have to be a billionaire to slow down the aging. You can do that with whatever economic resources that you have available.
Love it. Okay, my last question before I let you go. You have decades of clinical and research experience in the functional medicine and multiple sclerosis space. So, what do you think is the biggest lie about MS that you just wish would die?
All you have to do is take your DMT. The disease modifying treatment can be very helpful for reducing relapses, reducing the number of new enhancing lesions. It is not enough.
Hmm.
I want you to also hear and be told it's just as important to improve your nutrition, to stay connected to people so you're not lonely, to exercise, to monitor your sleep, to have some sort of stress reducing practice, whether it's prayer or meditation, mindfulness, and to begin addressing these lifestyle factors at a pace that you can manage. To improve your nutrition with your family, with a plan that you and your family can agree on.
It's so simple, right? It's nothing really fancy here. We just have to know how to do it. And that's why I'm going to lead everybody to your website, terrywahls.com, your books, the Wahls Protocol. You're on Facebook and Instagram. I see you on Instagram all the time.
Oh, yes. Follow me on Instagram. You get to see what I'm eating and doing. It's lots of fun. You see my garden, you see my food. So
Yeah,
much fun.
you eating liver. I'm like, yeah, I'm making liver too. Like, it's like,
It's good
it's
for you.
yes, it's great. It's you really give practical tips. It's nice to see you in your stories as well. So I encourage everyone to go and follow you there as well. And before I let you go, is there anything that's coming up that you'd like to share, or events or programs?
Well, be sure and sign up for my newsletter and my emails. We have free webinars often every month. Be sure to sign up so you can hear about all those free webinars that we offer.
Excellent. I'll have a link to that in the show notes too. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Wahls. I appreciate your time, your knowledge, all the research you're doing and pushing through it when everybody was pushing you back. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.